Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Activist Lawyer. It's just me today, Sarah, in the studio in Granite Exchange at the lovely Granite podcast studio. Unfortunately, our Jack is no longer with us at the moment. He's left for a little holiday, a 12-month holiday, off to Australia and other countries, but we hope to hear from him on his journeys, and he will hopefully tune in. I'm sure everybody will miss him. So just me today, but I'm very excited to be joined by Qays Sediqi. Hello, Qays.
Hi, Sarah.
Qays joins me via Zoom, unfortunately, because he's in London. And just by way of introduction, I know some fellow practitioners in immigration and asylum might be familiar with Qays and certainly will be familiar with some of his cases. Qays Sediqi is a solicitor and head of public law at Barnes, Harold and Dyer Solicitors. He specialises in public law, human rights and immigration law. A former refugee himself, Qays is passionate for fighting for people's human rights, particularly the most vulnerable in our society, and has been holding public bodies accountable for breaching those rights. He frequently challenges public bodies, mainly the Secretary of State for the Home Department at the High Court. His work includes challenging the Rwanda policy and representing Afghan interpreters who were refused under the Arab settlement scheme to the UK. His work has taken him, most recently as well, on many appearances with LBC, ITV News, News 24 and Al Jazeera's The Take, covering a lot of his most recent high-profile cases. Welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us, Qays.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
I've been following your work quite a lot. Obviously, it's quite high profile in terms of plans, the UK government's plans for removals or processing asylum claims in Rwanda, which is still quite shocking that is still a thing and we're still talking about it. And of course, you're in the thick of it with your work. But before we get into your core practice, would you mind sharing with our listeners just a little bit about yourself and maybe how you came into this work and how it's going?
Well, it depends how long do you have.
Talk with all day. It's a Friday.
Well, my journey started before I was born. My parents are originally from Afghanistan, and during the Cold War, they had to move to Pakistan because the situation in Afghanistan was dire. So they moved to Pakistan, where I was born. I was 3 years old when we moved to Holland. My father moved there before we did, and he sought asylum there on the basis of his political opinion because he was politically active. And he was granted and then invited us, I presume, through family reunion, but I'm not entirely sure. And so myself, my mother, and my siblings, we went to Holland, where unfortunately my parents divorced, and which also led to me wanting to become a lawyer, actually, because my father was very abusive and he wasn't a very good person. And my mother divorced him, and so we went through the whole system, and my mother took custody of us. And so we lived in Holland for a while, and then when I was 14 years old, we moved to the UK, and I've been living here ever since. So, my journey basically, as I said, even before I was born, I was pushed into the world of refugees, and I've experienced it myself. I've lived in a refugee camp myself in Holland, and I know how it's like to live there and how helpless and hopeless you feel in those situations. Now, in relation to my parents' divorce, it was a very it was a very shocking it was shocking for me to see as a child going through all of that, and the trauma, of course, my mother as well. And but the solicitors that we had, it was quite refreshing to see how much they fought for my mum, for her rights, even though she was just a refugee in a foreign country where she couldn't speak the language, she didn't know the culture or anything like that. So I was in awe by the solicitors who dealt with the case in my mother's divorce matter, and so that just instilled a sort of passion for me to also fight. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah,
I
of
just knew
course.
that I was only 4 or 5 years old, but I just knew that, oh, they're very cool, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I, I would want to do what they're doing. So I that, that thought sat with me for a while. I went through secondary school in the UK, and then I studied law at the university. I mean, the passion sort of dwindled throughout the way, but
Hmm.
it just at university, I was just like, okay, let me just try to study law.
Hmm.
Maybe I will try to find a passion for it again. So I
Hmm.
studied law, and I I didn't enjoy it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy studying law, and but in my third year, I did do a module called pro bono, and we were fighting for the injustices against a person in America, and we were trying to exonerate him.
Hmm.
And that was quite interesting. That really was like, okay, this is something that's very interesting. I want to get into this. And then, but still, I wasn't quite sure. I basically, so I completed my law degree, and then obviously, naturally, I wanted to do my LPC. Um, so I did my LPC. So yeah, I mean, I graduated. I mean, unlike others, I graduated with a 2.2. So I was like, okay, um, this is this is not a great start, and I felt defeated.
Hmm.
I felt like I was a failure. I was like, okay, this is it. I can't do much with this
Hmm.
law degree because only you can only do become a good lawyer if you get a 2.1 or a first.
Yeah.
So I was just very defeated, and I felt like, okay, I'm just going to do um, some recruitment because at the time there were some recruitment agents contacted me because I speak Dutch and German. They
Okay.
contacted me. They're like, okay, would you be interested in this? I was thinking, okay, I'll go into that, but my mum was like, no, you should continue. This is your passion.
Hmm.
You remember your 4 or 5 year old kids.
Oh.
Just do the LPC. Just see what will happen. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I studied the LPC. Following that, I started my first job, and during all of that, a lot happened as well. And but I still persevered and continued.
Hmm.
And once I got my LPC, I started my first ever job as a criminal paralegal,
Yeah.
and that was quite interesting, sitting in murder cases and rape
Hmm.
cases and things like that, speaking to clients and hearing their stories. But still, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I
Hmm.
want to do more immigration related work.
Hmm.
So I applied to Duncan Lewis where I worked
Hmm.
and as an immigration paralegal, and I stayed there for a year and 8 months. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then I went on to do my training contract, and now everything seems to have worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the type. I'm a prime example of someone who has learned to love what they do
As
over
opposed to,
time, and
yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, as opposed to from the start. I mean, initially at the start as a child, yes, but
The seed was
going
there as
into
a child. And then I wonder, was it your mother really encouraging you in the background because she saw maybe when you were a child how, impressed you were by, the lawyers who had helped your mum and shown, compassion and also worked very hard for her, as you said. But at the same time, that doesn't mean the journey's any less difficult. Law is tough. And especially because you have to study a load of subjects that you've virtually no interest in whatsoever.
absolutely,
That's the nightmare
absolutely,
about it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So definitely, I mean, it was. I just needed to be navigated
Yeah.
into the area I wanted to practice in. I mean, it was just, yeah. I've always had the passion for it, but I never knew what it was because a lot happened during that period of time as well, where I wasn't sure
Yeah.
what I wanted to do, and definitely the 2.2 that I had at university really beat me down, and
Mm.
it was difficult to rise back up, but I did, and then I just realized that okay, this is something I want to do now. I actually enjoy this, and I'm the type of person who believes in like you have to fight for your dreams. So if I want to do something, I want to be the best at what I do.
Yeah.
So I just worked double, triple, quadruple as hard as and as other people, and I mean working very late at night, pushing myself to my limits, and I mean it's worked out, and it's very rewarding to know that the work that you put in will eventually come into fruition. So there's still hope out there, basically, so that for the students that feel let down or don't have the motivation to study law anymore. As I said, I'm a prime example of that.
Yeah, to stick at it and find an area that you really like. And it's good that you can get practice in different areas to see what you like. So you're working primarily, I guess, within immigration and human rights law in general, being the head of public law at Barnes, Harold and Dyer Solicitors. So, I mean, I know you've probably hundreds of different types of cases going on. Before we recorded here, we had a little bit of a chat about our work. But I wanted to hone in on some of the cases that you've been working on recently, which have garnered quite a lot of attention and are quite high profile because they're related to the Rwanda policy that most of our listeners, I guess, will be familiar with. But I'm wondering, Qays, could you just maybe take us through a little bit of detail around what that in fact means for asylum seekers and refugees who are already in the UK?
It's in relation to the Nationality Borders and Bills Act, which received royal assent earlier this year. So the policy basically, what the aim of it is to send individuals who have arrived illegally to the UK, and with a specific sort of focus on certain nationalities, such as Iran, Sudan, and there were a few Albanian cases as well, where the focus is more on them, those nationalities where they want to remove those individuals to Rwanda for where their asylum paying or protection paying will be considered. And if they are granted, they will have to stay in that country.
Right.
So, as you can tell, it's just, it's a ridiculous policy, to be honest, from my perspective.
It's shocking. And they don't even, as far as I'm aware, they don't even have a criteria as such. But as you said, maybe there's a pattern, or are they honing in on different nationalities? I did hear that there are some Syrians who had recently arrived in the UK who were potentially, signalled for removal to Rwanda, which is also quite shocking. Are they looking at men, young men? Are there families? Are there children involved here?
At the moment, it seems to be the case that it's single men who have arrived to the UK illegally. I forgot to mention that the whole purpose from the Home Office's point of view is to deter individuals from entering the UK illegally. But there's so much that goes into this. I mean, how it's just the only way. I mean, the immigration rules themselves actually say that an individual can only claim asylum if they're in the UK.
Yeah.
So the whole reason why they're asylum seekers and refugees is because they can't get here on a legal basis because the immigration rules are strict, and they can't fulfill it. So the only way that they can come here is illegally, and they're being punished for that. So it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And to try and fit genuine or anybody claiming asylum, refugees who are coming here into, a scheme. And let's just be honest, the schemes haven't really worked to date. Well, I know the Ukraine scheme has worked, but Afghanistan is one of the schemes that you've been working on, the Afghan scheme too. I mean, horrendous to expect that these legal routes are the only way into a country to claim asylum. So yes, a deterrent, but everybody who enters the UK will be subject to that rule, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because my client, you have to also understand that most of these individuals, they travel with agents who have full control of their journey, so they don't even have a say in how, what countries they travel through, or in what method, and they have traveled through these difficult journeys to get here, and where they have no control over their journey. And actually, my client, he was trafficked in Turkey as well. He was abused and by the traffickers. So they really broke him down mentally, and they took away his passports, where they made him feel like he had no identity of himself whatsoever. So that's what these agents I've seen do, is to break their psyche, to really have control over them, so that they don't escape from them, and that they get the money at the end of the day. So that's something that's not been taken into consideration.
No, it hasn't.
And my client as well, before he was being put on the boat to come to the UK, one of the agents actually pointed a gun at him and said, "Get on this boat, or we're going to shoot you." So, I mean, there's that. So he obviously he doesn't want to get shot, so he got in the boat and crossed over to the UK, and he was arrested. I mean, to even have to deal with that trauma and then immediately being arrested and being taken to the detention center is just too much. And they're not seeing it from a human perspective.
No, and their focus is always on the traffickers. It's always on deterring the traffickers, and we need to stop trafficking into the UK. But the victims of trafficking really haven't been considered at all here. And I have read just some of the reports following the first plane, some of the asylum seekers who were rounded up for the first flight, which was stopped at the 11th hour by the European Court of Human Rights back in June, wasn't it? Or in the summer.
So two of them were my clients.
Two were your clients. Well, from, I think one of the reports that was published in that had described, so, and it highlighted some of the journeys that those asylum seekers and refugees had already been on. And I think some of them had crossed through Libya, suffered severe torture there. So already on an absolutely harrowing, traumatic journey, get to the UK, are rounded up onto a plane knowing in their mind, they did not know what was happening essentially legally, or what decision was going to, or the courts were going to arrive at. But the trauma on that plane that was suffered by those men, I guess most of them were probably men at that point, is simply hard to believe. You know,
absolutely.
And I read that, and I was absolutely shocked that they, in the UK, were treated like that. They were restrained forcibly, some of them. Some of them had expressed suicidal thoughts and wanted to kill themselves before they would ever get on the plane to go to Rwanda, which is just so
absolutely.
depressing.
So they made that very clear. I mean, the flight was going to take off on the 14th, was supposed to take off on the 14th of June. And a couple of weeks before that, that's when we actually really started to focus on this case. And I was heavily involved in this, and the team at Garden Court Chambers, they were absolutely amazing. They were available around the clock, and without them, I wouldn't have been able to get the result that we did. And so what we did is we initially applied for interim relief, and we wanted to stop our client being removed because we were worried that he was a victim of trafficking. But we went on the 14th of June in the morning. We went to court, and there were 3 other individuals in the same courtroom as us, and all of them were refused. All of them interim relief was refused. So we were thinking, okay, well, the flight is going to take off. We thought at that time that it was at 8:30 the flight was going to take off, but we later learned that it was 10:30. And so we were like, okay, we have to move on. And bearing in mind that we barely had any sleep, like a couple of days before that in preparation for this hearing. So we applied to the Court of Appeal, and then we found out that Duncan Lewis's case, their Rule 39 application to the European Court of Human Rights was granted.
Okay.
And so we made a similar application, and then at 9 o'clock we were at the Court of Appeal. Before that, I mean, it was just chaos, absolute chaos, preparing the application, because you have to bear in mind that this usually in normal circumstances, these applications you have to prepare, you get weeks
Yeah.
to prepare for this application, but we had a matter of minutes or
Minutes.
hours to do
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. Wow.
Um, so we had to work really fast, and at the other end, the client was kept calling me, "What is happening?" So and then at 10 o'clock at night, so half an hour before the flight was due to take off, the judge at the Court of Appeal, the Master of the Rolls, granted our application and
Okay.
stayed the sort of yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge success, but it was only it was only interim relief, wasn't it? So
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and
exactly. But
it was fantastic in terms of the media coverage on it around the flights were stopped. And of course, all of the agencies as well that support, support this case and work with asylum seekers and refugees and know their vulnerabilities, who were horrified at the prospect of this, celebrated this as a victory. But it was only one step. So obviously a huge amount of work for you and the team involved, extremely exhausting, no doubt. It was a success. But what about your clients and the other people that were on that plane? How were they? How are they?
so there were five individuals on the plane, and two of them were my clients. And when I spoke to them afterwards, they said that um, they were treated horribly on the plane.
Okay.
They were restrained. All of them were crying. Uh, they were shouting and screaming, and uh, because obviously they were being removed to a country where they had no connection to whatsoever. Uh, my client actually told me that he couldn't even point Rwanda on the map.
No.
So he was being removed from the only source of family that he had in the UK, and being removed to a country where he had nobody, and he didn't even know the country uh, um, on that level where he could actually survive as a
Yeah.
human being. So he was restrained on the plane. He was crying. They refused to the officers didn't take anything. They closed the doors on them, let them cry and everything like that. So
Wow.
they didn't even try to assure them or try to make them feel better about everything. So they were treated like animals, and you can't
Absolutely.
do that. These people are people,
Yeah.
and they have feelings. They have been through so much, and uh, this is like a big step for them. Even if they were to be removed to Rwanda, it's a horrible feeling to be put through all of that, having all that trauma, having suffered all that trauma. So there's a disconnect on a human level, and it was just horrible to hear that
Yeah.
from my clients, that this is something that they had to go through just before leaving to a country where they didn't know where it was.
Yeah.
But luckily that didn't go ahead. But my client, when I speak to him, he still tells me that like he gets nightmares
Sure.
about that day on the plane, and he says that it makes him really sad and upset having when he thinks
Yeah.
about that. And
And it's still looming
it,
over them because him and the others, and let's be honest, it could be anybody. If there's no criteria that's been published, any of these young men or older men or people who've just arrived are likely candidates for selection, which just must be to live under
absolutely.
that stress and anxiety after having been through, a serious amount of trauma. I just can't imagine the cruelty that's been
Absolutely.
perpetrated on
And
those people.
but that's something that makes me realize why I do what I do,
Mm,
to be an activist lawyer, to fight for these people, because we are their mouthpiece. We
yeah,
are we are basically uh, they can't express how they feel. They don't know the system, so we are there
yeah,
for them on their behalf. So it makes me fight for them even more
yeah,
for their rights, because everyone has human rights, and everyone's human rights should be respected.
yeah,
Um, so,
absolutely.
but it seems like uh, with the immigrants and refugees, it's just the human rights are being waived, and it doesn't matter with them. But no,
Yeah,
that's not the case. They're also humans. So it's very important for me to fight for them and to make their voices be heard.
Yeah, despite how exhausting and tiring it is, you can certainly see that you come from a place of real passion for it. And I'm sure the lawyers there that supported you are the exact same. But aren't you just getting in the way of the government's plans? You're, a pesky activist, lefty lawyer is what you've probably been described as. So not everybody's going to be jumping around with joy about this, particularly because the government have come out and said that Rwanda is a safe country for these people to go to. And there's absolutely no reason why these lawyers should be getting in the way of their plans to do this. Absolutely astounding what their response and their defence has been to date. So we'll go back to that again in terms of context, but just you aren't finished here with your work on this case and others. Can you bring us up to speed maybe with what has happened recently in terms of the High Court action around this?
Yes. So this matter was listed for a hearing, for a 5-day hearing. By the way, this hearing is not just my clients; it's a huge group of a cohort of individuals in this matter. There's 18, 19 individuals who are being represented by 5 firms.
And are those individuals people who've received notices that they will be removed?
Notice of intention, yes, notice of intention. So all of them have received notice of intention. Majority of them. They got their removal on the 14th of June cancelled. It was only those 5 individuals who were on the plane, but still they were being considered for removal to Rwanda. So that the hearing was listed on the 5th of September, and we went to court for 5 days. The judges heard from our perspective. From the Home Office's perspective as well. I mean, it was a huge case. I mean, there was around 40, 50 barristers from both sides. And the courtroom was just filled. There was a sea of barristers. And so we went there, and the hearing went ahead. But there is another element to the case as well, asylum aid case. Asylum aid cases where they are just challenging the policy and they don't have clients like individuals to represent, like with our cases, with the other 19 individuals. So they're just literally challenging the Rwanda
policy itself.
Yeah. So that hearing has been listed for the 10th of October.
Okay, the 10th of October.
2 days, yeah. For 2 days, yeah. So it's quite soon. And following that, the judges have said that they're going to make a decision on the judicial review following that hearing. So after the 11th of October, anytime after that, they'll make a decision. And I think they're going to make a quick decision. They probably have written up their decision already. They're just waiting to hit for the 10th of October. And then following that, they're going to hand down judgment. And obviously, it's quite natural that whatever happens, it's not going to be the end. We believe that if we win, the Home Office are going to challenge it.
Yeah.
If we lose, we're going to challenge it at the Court of Appeal. So it's going to be a long process.
It will be a long process, but hugely impactful on hundreds and hundreds of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and can I just ask, what is the core of the challenge in terms of is the argument that Rwanda is not a safe country? Is that the crux of the argument against the policy for the individuals that you're representing?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of challenges within one challenge, but essentially the crux of our argument is that Rwanda is not a safe country. And I mean, it's been backed up by the intervener in the case, which is the UNHCR. And they are also essentially saying that Rwanda is not a safe country, and that's not being taken on board. And in answer to your question, that is essentially what we're asking.
And I mean, even aside from, I guess you're knee deep in the legalities of everything and the process in terms of challenging this matter. But given it some context as well, I mean, you only have to think about, not only is it clearly not a safe country to return asylum seekers or send asylum seekers or refugees to have their cases processed, but practically speaking, I mean, how on earth is there a facility there? In terms of, I even read about there's no funding in place for interpreters. There's no support in place for anybody. None of this has been set up. It seems to be a handshake deal between Priti Patel, the Rwandan government, millions of pounds of UK money exchanged, but nothing at all set up. And surely that has to have a level of consideration as well. Not only is the country completely unsuitable for many reasons, I mean, it completely cracks down on anybody politically, political oppression against the regime there. LGBTQ plus people live in fear there. So significant reasons as to why it's not a safe country, but practically speaking, how is this going to work? And what if somebody is refused refugee status in Rwanda? What happens to them?
Exactly. So there's, as I said, there's loads of challenges in just the one challenge, but you have touched on the main points. I mean, most of these people won't have interpreters available to them. The accommodation is in horrible conditions, even though they have provided assurances to say that they will be looked after, this, that, the other, but from the research that the UNHCR has done in this, there are so many issues with the assurances that they have given.
Yeah.
So on a practical level, it's not possible. But to be quite honest, we never thought that it would take off the way it did, because we just thought that if we presented the evidence to the Home Office, they would actually back down. But it seems that they're quite in on this, and they want to see this through, and they're quite relentless.
Even under Suella Braverman, even under new leadership now, it doesn't seem to have changed. In fact, I might be wrong, I don't know, but it seems to be more of a hard line, which is worrying. Oh,
yes,
God.
exactly. So, I mean, it's like, it's just under Suella's rules. It's going to be even worse, I think. So, but then again, this is why we have people like us, activist lawyers, fighting for this, and it's important that we fight for human rights, because essentially, even though we're fighting for other individuals, we are fighting for our rights as well.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, I mean, we're doing ourselves a favor as well. So it's really important that we get more people on board and to basically fight for our rights. I mean, to have more activist lawyers.
Absolutely. And I mean, anybody listening to you would be wholly inspired. I mean, I guess it's not an easy job, but you do get that sense of reward from your work that we'll talk about a little bit later towards the end. But I'm glad to see that your colleagues, I guess, as well, are determined, to see this through on behalf of those very vulnerable, very worried individuals who've already been through enough to have to deal with this. And it's just beggars belief that this still continues, and the whole world looking in on this to see how the UK, who prides itself in being a beacon for human rights and equality,
inclusive,
is just going to follow this through. But we wish you all the best of luck, and your colleagues on this, and of course your clients as well. We'll watch very closely. But just on another point that you've been working on, that we've kind of touched on a little bit here in our office, is to do with very vulnerable Afghan asylum seekers and refugees who seem to have been forgotten about when it comes to UK immigration policy. And I know you've had a little bit of success with some of your cases, if you want to have a chat about that.
So these cases have a special place in my heart, because obviously I'm Afghan myself. So to be able to help individuals from my country, it's a huge honor for me. So whenever I have Afghan clients, I'm always honored to help, to give back to my roots, so to speak. And I've been helping challenging the Ministry of Defense, Secretary of State for Defense and Secretary of State for the Home Department in relation to the Afghan relocation and assistance policy, the Arab scheme. And these are individuals, majority of them are interpreters who were on the ground helping the army in interpreting and being a bridge between the Taliban and them and the British forces. So I've been helping them with challenging their refusals, because the applications, when they were submitted by these clients, they were refused, and they were not given any sort of reasons for the refusal. They just said that they have been refused on security grounds, with no context or background provided whatsoever as to how they came to that conclusion. So obviously, it's literally just one line, nothing else. So we took this on. I had 7 or 8 clients last year referred to me, and we issued judicial review proceedings. On all cases, the Home Office conceded and withdrew their decisions, the original decision, and said that they will make a new decision within, they said 2 weeks, then it was 4 weeks, then they kept delaying, and in the meantime, they were amending their policy so that they could actually apply it and refuse more people.
Yeah, and close off the schemes.
That was the whole reason.
Yeah,
exactly. That was the whole reason for the delay, and we were fuming. We said that you said 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago. So, but eventually they did make new decisions, and 2 of them actually got granted the first time round, but the others, 5 or 6 of them, I can't remember off the top of my head, they still got refused second time round. And we waited 2.5 months just to get the same answer that we had 3 months ago, or when we issued this judicial review. Exactly. So one line refusal saying that they have been refused on security grounds with no context or background provided. So we challenged it again. And on this occasion, the second time round, they actually they also agreed to withdraw the decision and make new decisions. And the new decisions on 3 cases, I believe, 4 cases, they were granted. So we were thinking, hold on, what was so different the second time round that wasn't considered in the first time round? So we were thinking that they hadn't considered the cases properly the first time round. So if we hadn't challenged them the second time round, and we didn't stick around and persevered, then the clients wouldn't have had the outcome that they had, which was a grant of their visas. So there was something wrong in that sense. So some internal issues that they overlooked, and it just goes to show that like the Home Office, and they're so careless, they're so inconsiderate of everything, and they, even though they say that they're looking into this and making investigations and everything like that, they're not.
I mean, it's unnecessary. And it also shows that those schemes are fundamentally flawed from the outset. They still celebrate these schemes. If you look at their policy about these schemes for Afghan nationals that were lauded over whenever, the tragedies and the crisis started to unfold, earlier in the year, in practice, none of them worked. And you're just explaining in detail their problems that can arise. But without that persistence from you, a legal team behind them, nothing would have happened to those people. So the fact that these schemes were advertised or marketed as, providing assistance to those who help the British forces, interpreters, and, we look after them. And it had lots of political support, especially from people here in Northern Ireland as well, who haven't really supported any other immigration schemes, well, apart from Ukraine. But on the ground and practically, they're not working. And we've had people who have been, who felt like they were accepted somewhat onto the scheme. So they got past the first part, maybe, which was asking them for their ID, the details, explaining what they do, their family names. And then they never heard from them again.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
follow up on it, and then an email, an automated response comes saying, yeah, no, the schemes are now closed, or they're not opened up, or they're yet to reopen. And these people are sitting in Kabul
Yeah.
thinking and hoping and praying that their case will soon be assessed. And then there's nothing. There's nothing.
Absolutely.
So it's just
Absolutely.
another example of a complete shambolic, attempt to, I don't even know what they're, what they're attempting
And
to do.
yeah, and you know better than I do. I mean, so after the first refusal of the judicial review, if you get a negative outcome, you have to consider whether there's any merit. So most practitioners, unfortunately, would turn them down because they would say that there's no merit, and the clients would be told, no, there's nothing we can
Yeah.
do, or we've done the judicial review process for you, and there's unfortunately nothing we can do, and that would be the end of it. I mean, if that would have been the case, then those people would have been left in danger in Kabul, fearing for their lives.
Yeah.
And all of my clients were in hiding, and they had to move about because neighbors were spying on them
Yeah.
and being informants. So they were afraid of everyone. So having to live like that for the
No.
rest of your life and being unable to leave the country is impossible to do. So it's really important to persevere,
Yeah.
I believe, and to really
Well,
fight
yeah.
for the clients.
Good.
But yeah, on another note though, at the moment I'm also going to be challenging the clients that have been granted under the Arab scheme, they're still not been relocated. So I've had two clients who were granted in February and March, and they're still in Kabul. So the FCDO is being unresponsive. So we will be challenging the unlawful delay and
Okay.
making arrangements to bring them over, which is another challenge.
Another challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I've got my other client who's got a hearing. So the two pending cases. One of them will have a hearing hopefully in November, the Southern Judicial Review hearing at the High Court. So that's still all in the cards.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so it's a never-ending story.
No,
Even
it's
if you
never
get
ending.
positive outcome, yeah.
It's never ending. And, you're doing absolutely groundbreaking work there as well. I'm sure it's exhausting but rewarding. And I like that you've mentioned throughout, you've used the term activist lawyer quite proudly. And
Yeah.
I mean, the title of this podcast, obviously, anyone listening, it's Activist Lawyer. And it's for people like you and our other guests who, work in very difficult circumstances, let's be honest. It's not easy. Your job is certainly not easy. But we're trying to encourage people, to consider this type of work and really to use this as a platform to share your work with practitioners who maybe work in human rights, but not necessarily immigration, and who have an interest. So we're hoping to build upon this platform to share what people like you are doing and to spark an interest in people who maybe are considering that. And on that note, what advice, Qays, would you have for any of our listeners who are interested in getting into, I mean, you're doing the real nitty gritty of immigration and asylum law. I mean, you're stuck in there.
I've as I've said, I've been someone who was interested and intrigued by the work that lawyers do, and then that spark just dwindled. So it wasn't there anymore. But if I believe that if I had gone to more events and was listening to these podcasts back when I was at university or something like that, then I would have actually the journey would have started earlier than
You would have had
than
more
it has.
confidence, maybe, just because
Absolutely, yeah. I
sometimes
would
you
have
feel
had
a
more
little bit
confidence.
isolated in law, especially if you're working in this area. So it's nice to know that others feel the same, I guess.
Absolutely, and I think you're doing a marvelous job at that. So to really spread the message, to have this podcast, and I wish that we had podcasts like this back when I was at
Yeah,
university.
me too.
Yeah, but I mean, for the students, I would say to open your ears and open your eyes to all of these opportunities that are out there for you. You are important. We need people like you, and the work that we are doing is not just for this Iranian client or that Iraqi client. Essentially, what it is, we're fighting for everyone, for humanity, and it's really important to have a voice, especially in the current climate, where the government is not what it seems to closely and to really hold them accountable for their sort of flaws.
Sure.
And we need people to carry on spreading the message. And I believe that you can only do that if you open your eyes and ears and be open to this. And the work is very rewarding. It's very enjoyable as well. And at the same time, you're doing something for a good cause.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these factors have ultimately instilled a passion I can't describe. And it's a passion that has grown in me over time.
Sure.
It's not something I had from the beginning, but it's something that has grown over time, and it's an exhilarating feeling to actually do something as a general for the whole country, which is to fight for people's human rights.
Yeah.
So as I said, I would just give them advice to take every opportunity to attend these sort of to listen to these podcasts, attend events, speak to your professors, and then hopefully you can join the family.
The family. I think that's just excellent advice for anybody listening. You're so right. I mean, I wish I had have been able to speak to practitioners and had more of a kind of a clinical approach to legal education back in my day, because you don't have the confidence, and it is very procedural as well. And you think, oh gosh, am I able to do this? So you're right. It is a family, and I know my fellow practitioners here, we all feel like a little mini family. It might be via WhatsApp, but without that support, you'd be completely lost. So that's excellent advice and very encouraging for people thinking about going into that area of practice. So, I mean, it's just been an absolute pleasure, Qays, to talk to you today. And I like to follow your work and your updates anyway on LinkedIn and online. And I'll certainly be tuning in to seeing what you're up to and what the outcome is for those really important cases that are coming up. So make sure you stay in touch with us here. And it'd be great to have you on again at some point. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me and for listening to me, and the viewers as well. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions or anything that you want further advice on, or if you're unsure or anything, you can contact me on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Oh, that's so
and I'll
kind.
be more than happy to speak with you and answer your questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.